On today's episode, we talk about Pokemon Go, AR, VR, and...
The history of divorce.
Woo! Brienza's Know Best starts now. Okay, welcome, one and all, to Brienza's Know Best. Very special episode.
So special.
Because we're in the same room together.
We are here in the same exact spot. We're not on opposite coasts.
Which is great for me because I really hate editing. I'm visiting Laura in California.
What?
That's our new gang. Is that you're editing that out?
So much for the no editing rule.
No, well, whatever. She just threw me. She's got this new Cali vibe I just can't handle.
Come on, bruh.
Yeah, all right.
Mike's here on the West Coast. We've been having all sorts of fun at the beach. We went to Harry Potter World.
That was awesome.
Michael is the proud owner of a wand.
Professor Lupin's. It's pretty great. Yeah, we had a pretty fun time. Ate a lot of food. Went to Harry Potter World. Went on the Universal tour. All that fun stuff. And after a lot of convincing, we decided that we should probably record something at least once. So I guess with that in mind, after all the kind of craze that's been going on over the past week, I figured I would teach Laura about Pokemon Go, which everyone probably has heard of. And then hopefully I can talk a little bit more about VR and AR, which I'll get into. But I'm going to start with Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go, for those of you who don't know, is a mobile game, which means it's on iPhones or Android phones, and it uses users' locations, and it uses basically through Google Maps to figure out where you are in the world. And as you're walking around the world, it'll tell you, hey, guess what? There's a Pokemon near you. Pokemon is a creature from a Japanese anime, cartoon, or and video game series and card game, hugely popular. If you don't know what Pokemon is, then I don't know, you've probably been living under a rock. Even I think our dad knows what Pokemon is.
Even he knows.
And he's been making fun of me for playing this since he heard about it. So yeah, anyways, it's very big, very popular. So Pokemon Go brings kind of the nostalgia of and dreams of kids into the real world. You know, when I was
really a game for dreamers.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was what Steve Jobs was talking about when he says,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't remember his quote.
If you dream it, you can be it.
That's it.
You can be a Pokemon.
Yes.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. But anyways, so, you know, as a little kid, you know, you're watching Pokemon, and you'd see, you know, Ash Ketchum, the main character, running around the world and catching these Pokemon who lived out in the wilderness or in cities and everywhere. And you would just think, like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if I could have a Charmander or a Squirtle or some other creature name that half of you are probably thinking, what the heck is he talking about? So this game is kind of the realization of that. And again, like I said, how it works is it figures out where you are in the world, and it'll have random Pokemon kind of appear. So when that happens, your phone will buzz, and it takes control really of your camera. And if you look at your phone, it'll show you the real world out in front of you, but it'll overlay on top of that a 3D creature, which you can then kind of throw Pokeballs at, which is a ball for catching Pokemon. It's aptly named. And it's...
Someone thought real hard about that one.
And it's really amazing. There's also a few other...
So this is an example of what? AR. Let's explain what that is.
So AR is augmented reality, which is different than virtual reality. So virtual reality is you put on a headset or some other type of contraption, and it really just envelops your senses, and it takes you to a whole new world. So a lot of these virtual reality rigs are coming out in the next couple of years. You know, Oculus Rift is the big name, which is owned by Facebook. Google just came out with Project Dreamscape, which is basically making all their Android phones capable of running VR experiences, which would then be kind of put into, you could basically put your phone into a headset and it would take care of the sound and the correct positioning, but the hardware would be able to, on any phone, would be able to run it. That's Google's kind of push. And I can kind of get into that maybe a different day, talking about the mobile supply chain. Basically, really quickly, one reason virtual reality is so doable now is because of the explosion of mobile phones. There's about 300 million computers worldwide at any given moment that are actively being used, and there are about 2 billion mobile phones being used right now, and it's going to be about 5 billion phones by 2020.
Wow.
And it's such a huge, it's a computer in everyone's pocket. And while that's amazing, what it also does is it makes the supply chain really, really cheap. And it's forced people to make really, really tiny components that are also really powerful. Which means it's really, really easy to make a phone now that has amazing, amazing power. So you can really just show these amazing virtual worlds that have really low latency and a sense of presence. So your brain is theoretically tricked into believing that this world exists. And if you had the right sound and all that fun stuff, you believe the world exists. So that's all virtual reality. Augmented reality is a cousin of virtual reality, but it's your world, the real world, and it has a digital overlay in front of it. So it uses a lot of the same processors and a lot of the same ideas, but also a lot of different ideas. A lot of companies are buying into machine learning, and especially machine visual learning, which is basically means that computers are able to process and figure out that, hey, that thing in front of me is a car, that thing in front of me is a dog, that thing in front of me is a plane, whatever. And that helps the computer just position stuff in front of you. So again, augmented reality is digital overlay of the real world. And so Niantic, which is a company owned by Google and Nintendo, came out with Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go overlays Pokemon in the real world. And this, I think, is a great way of introducing the world to augmented reality.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before this whole craze.
Yeah.
And this game has only been out since Thursday.
Yeah, it's been about a week now.
A little over a week.
A little over a week. It makes about $2 million a year. $2 million a day. And it already has more traffic than Twitter. It has more downloads than Tinder. It has more minutes a day used than Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat even. Now, it's true that this has just come out and it's a bit of a craze, so those numbers may go down, but it really is just amazing how effective it is. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that this is the dawn of augmented reality. I think it says more.
This is the peak.
Well, I really hope
it's
not.
It's all been building to this.
I really hope not. But I think it's a great introduction, and this is something I really want to talk about. I think it says more about Pokemon than augmented reality. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pokemon Go before I forget to tell you about some of the interesting facts I found before I really dive into kind of my thesis on virtual reality and augmented reality.
Okay.
So Pokemon Go, as I've talked about, is based on the real world. So some things that I think are interesting coming out are in the future, Pokemon Go will soon get ads. However, the form that it will take is sponsored locations. For instance, McDonald's could say, hey, if you come to a McDonald's today, there's a really high chance you'll get a Vaporeon.
Which a rare Pokemon.
Which, honestly, it's not that rare, but it caused the stampede in Central Park a few days ago. So I think that's really interesting.
So that's not what it's doing already? Like, aren't there locations now?
There are tons of locations that you can go to. So the reason there's sponsored locations in the future is right now there are these Pokestops, which is actually a really interesting part of the game. I think it's a really great idea. Basically, it highlights interesting areas or high traffic areas, but also like landmarks in your town or whatever town you're visiting. So I found out that Grover Cleveland is buried in Princeton because I was playing Pokemon Go when I went to a Pokestop so I could get extra like Pokeballs.
Education.
And I was like, oh, Grover Cleveland's buried here. I had no idea. So I learned something from Pokemon, everyone. and you can go. And the reason you go there is to get Pokeballs and other things, because you only have a limited amount of Pokeballs, and if you don't go out and like explore the town and go to these Pokestops, you would have to buy them for like $1 gets you like 100 or something like that. But still, you could just be an active person and not be lazy and go get this all for free.
Speaking of which, I read that it is making people more active. People are walking their dogs more. People who don't exercise are now out and about. It's promoting exercise. Yes. It's promoting group, cohesiveness.
It's really great. Speaking for myself, walking around Princeton, I spent about 6 hours running around Princeton with my girlfriend. I saw thousands. Totally not hyperbole, but thousands of kids just running around, just like, there's a zoo bat over there, oh my god! And it's amazing to see,
Yeah.
And even now, visiting you at the beach, I see kids in just packs, just running around looking for a Psyduck or a Charizard.
It's not just kids. I was at Starbucks and I saw like some 35-year-old man, like talking about Pokemon Go.
Our mother was talking to a woman her age who was playing Pokemon Go at Starbucks today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's nerds come in all ages. Pokestops are a place where you can get Pokeballs for free, and also there's a higher chance of getting a Pokemon there. So sponsored locations are a way to drive people to your area, which I think is really another area where ad tech is going to be going in the future.
Yeah, that's a very sneaky way to get you to...
I don't know if it's sneaky because I think it says...
It's not as disruptive. Like, watching an ad before a TV show annoys me. But if you're playing a game and you just happen to stumble upon an ad, that feels less intrusive.
Yeah. And, well, if it's a sponsored location, it's more like you don't have to, but if you do go to McDonald's...
There's an incentive.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Which I think is interesting. Like I said, Pokemon Go is on more devices than Candy Crush, LinkedIn, Lyft, Tinder, and more. There's a really fun glitch. So... South Korea.
Oh, I'm just pointing to an interesting fact that I saw about Pokemon
tell me about your... Tell me.
Okay. Well, I read that what's really interesting about Pokemon Go is that not only does it have a huge number of downloads, but its retention rate is also huge. So typically, people who download a game, 3 out of 10 people return to it after the first day. But with Pokemon Go, about 7 out of 10 people return to it. And that's something I learned from Silicon Valley. Check it out on HBO. It's really good.
Talking about daily active users?
Yeah, daily active users is what you want. Like, yeah, if 10 billion people download your game, that's really awesome. But if only 3 of them are actually returning to play the game, that's no good.
Yeah, no one cares.
So you need daily active users, which Pokemon has up the wazoo.
Talking about locations, Pokemon Go isn't available in South Korea because the game uses data from Google Maps, which is restricted by the South Korean government due to security concerns. South Korea is still...
What about North Korea?
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un is a huge Pokemon Go fan.
He's the only one who has the internet there. He's getting all the Pokemon.
He's the world's greatest Pokemon Go player.
Well, anyway, so South Korea is still technically at war with North Korea, and the government has stated that it could release its map data only if Google deletes information of key security locations like military facilities. However, there is a tiny loophole. There's one town what's the town called? Sorry. I'm going to say this so wrong. I apologize to anyone who is like Korean and is going to yell at me. I doubt out of the 20 people that anyone is. But anyways, there's a town called Sakcho, and it's the one town in South Korea that is just far up enough on the map that users can play Pokemon Go. It's not like restricted by South Korea. So the town is getting flooded by tourists. Thousands and thousands of people. The mayor...
Hashtag tourism.
Yeah, exactly. The mayor is promoting it. Like, you guys can play Pokemon Go here. People have... There's cabs that now exclusively just take people up to Sakcho to, like, play Pokemon. It's amazing. It's really, really... so, like, people love Pokemon is what I'm trying to say. Anyways, I want to get back to kind of my thesis on VR and AR. I think that AR is an amazing technology, and this is going to introduce us to AR. However, I think that the next couple years will be dominated by VR,
Mm-hmm.
which is, again, virtual reality. And the reason I think that is that virtual reality is so much easier to kind of deal with. And it's a much cooler phenomena in that, all right, I'm going to sit in this room, or I'm going to stand, whatever, and I'm just going to be immersed in this experience and see these worlds. And AR takes a lot more buy-in because you're walking around the world with something either in front of you or on your face.
So VR is interactive. It's not passive, but augmented reality is even more active, right?
Yes, so VR can be interactive. It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, filmmakers are looking into how to make VR films, which don't necessarily need you to be active. It just means that you're there, and they have to figure out how to draw your attention to different things, which is a whole different topic we can get into one day. But yeah, VR is very interactive. AR, again, takes more buy-in because you're either holding something, you're walking around the real world, or you have something on your face. For instance, kind of the thing that didn't work out a couple years ago was Google Glass. And, you know, it takes a lot to tell someone you have to wear this thing on your face. It got the hashtag glass holes.
Oh, I missed that one.
No, because and people got like mugged and like taken because they're like, that's an expensive piece of hardware on your face. I'm gonna take it.
No.
Yeah, which wasn't great.
Come on, people.
But Google kind of pivoted and they decided, okay, I think AR is a couple years out, but they decided next version of Google Glass is completely business based, and they're finding a lot of success there. Surgeons use it to kind of highlight like what the areas of the body are. Like they obviously know. This kind of helps put an overlay of what they're looking at.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, my question was gonna be, what are some other uses beyond playing a Pokemon game that this is good for?
So Boeing is actually working on a program right now where all their technicians are starting to wear Google Glass. So when they're working on these very complex engines, especially this one part where they have to do a lot of wiring, they have AR components basically overlaying, showing, hey, this is kind of how this is how it's put together. Please do this. And it's very technical and very, very nimble, and also requires a lot of know-how. So a robot couldn't do it necessarily. And a human can do it, but there's a lot of room for error. So this is this so far has cut down on production time by 25% and reduced error rates to almost inconsequential amounts.
Wow, that's good.
So I'm gonna kind of wrap it up. I know I only have like 15 minutes, but AR is again kind of the real future. I think it's the next computing platform. Google is invested in Magic Leap, which has their own AR platform. Microsoft has the HoloLens. These are probably 5 to 10 years out, where virtual reality is in the next, let's call it the next 2 years is when it'll start to really become mainstream, I think. Augmented reality, we're seeing a lot of business interest in by business I mean like Facebook and Apple and all them. They're doing a lot of patents, and that is the next platform because it mixes tech with the real world, where we can see Pokemon in front of us, but it can also give us really easy map instructions with arrows overlaying our stuff. It can give us information that's really pertinent to us at any given time. It can give us it's really hard to explain over voice considering it's all about vision, but the advances in technology have been truly astounding. I urge anyone out there to look up Magic Leap demo videos if possible. The Microsoft HoloLens demo videos. I actually showed our aunt Gigi a HoloLens demo video, and she really audibly gasped, and not just to make me feel better about showing her my nerd
Gigi.
stuff. Because they showed this one game which they're playing it on their computer screen. They say, you know what, let's play it on our table. So they grab the screen that's not really there, and they throw it on the table, and this whole world builds up in front of them. It's really, truly amazing. And there's another one. They have the Star Wars. They finally perfected the Star Wars hologram, they call it. They have two people in opposite rooms, in different parts of the state, and in front of them is a fully realized 3D figure that operates in real time, and they're just talking to each other like they're both in the same room, which was really, really amazing to see. So augmented reality is far out, but I think it will
it is. So far out, man.
Yeah, but it's going to transform. It's going to transform the world as we know it.
It already is.
And I'm really, really, really quite excited. But for now, I'm gonna go catch Pokemon and be a nerd. So I guess that's the end of mine.
Okay. Well, that was great. No, I'm so glad you talked more about like the possibilities that AR has for the future, because I think, man, the next 10 years are going to be nuts. It's going to be awesome. Okay, totally switching gears. I am going to teach Michael about the history of divorce.
Yeah.
Totally different. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of divorce and then focus on what's going on in America in the last 40 years. So first of all, I just want to dispel this pretty common rumor that Henry VIII started divorce. He actually never got divorced, but he did have a pretty big role in this idea that it was okay for marriages to end.
I thought that was, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, but my thought was that he created a whole new church.
Yeah, everybody thinks he started the Church of England just so he could get divorced, but he actually never technically got divorced. So let's talk about it. Henry VIII, he wanted to annul his marriage to his wife, Catherine of Aragon, because the nerve, she didn't have a son. And they were still governed by the Roman Catholic Church at this point. The church said, no, you cannot get an annulment. So he broke off and started the Church of England in 1533. Now he could marry Anne Boleyn. And he did, but he didn't technically divorce Catherine of Aragon. I think he just granted himself an annulment. Interestingly, and we're not going to get too much into this, breaking off from the Roman Catholic Church meant that England also no longer had access to their network of schools, hospitals, convents, monasteries. So this was not just a religious, there were not just religious implications, there are big structural infrastructure implications. So 3 years into his marriage of Anne, she was convicted of treason, adultery, and incest. He beheaded her. So he had 2 marriages down. Fast forward a little bit, in England, it's not like divorce was all of a sudden super possible. There were still so many limitations in how you could get a divorce. Essentially, you needed a parliament to vote. And this required you to be a person of means and status. So obviously this didn't happen too often. And because gender inequality is the name of the game, a man had to prove adultery in order to be granted a divorce. Well, a woman had to prove adultery and something additionally awful. And plenty of women were not granted divorces for brutality, rape, desertion. So
those weren't awful?
Yeah, those weren't awful enough. I don't know, what would have been awful enough.
Rape's not, that bad? That's what they said?
Yeah.
Jesus.
They were that's not... Well, essentially, this idea of rape within a marriage did not exist. They were the man has access to your body because you're his wife, so... You're his property. Yeah, you don't have control over anything, little woman. So we'll get into how that changed in a little bit. So women were more likely to obtain a legal separation on the basis of adultery or cruelty. But there were a lot of disincentives to campaigning for a separation because back then your children were taken away from you, essentially. Also,
that might be an incentive for some people.
I hate my kids. I'm getting a separation. Also, the women were technically required to remain faithful, even if they were separated. And this
What?
is, I know, this is at a time when women didn't have much economic power. So essentially, you'd be penniless, alone, still having to remain faithful, and you didn't have your kids. So people weren't exactly chomping at the bit to get separated. You could get an annulment if a marriage was not consummated. That reason for annulment has been around forever. And if a husband could not consummate the marriage, you could get an annulment. But interestingly, if a man suddenly found his potency after annulment with a new wife, his first annulment was declared invalid.
What?
So, yeah, technically, like if you couldn't get it up for your first wife, but you could get it up for your second wife, then your first annulment was no longer recognized. So this led to a lot of bigamy. That's being married to more than one person at a time. So bigamy was pretty common until 1753 when the Marriage Act kind of said, all right, we need to fix this problem. So speaking of, women having ownership over their bodies, in 1631, some good progress is made in England. This is the year when the Earl of Castlehaven held his wife's body down while one of his servants raped her. He argued in court that a wife's body belonged to her husband, so it was up to him what happens to her body. He was actually sentenced to death. Woohoo!
Ooh.
So this is a step in the right direction for marital rights and women in general. All right, let's fast forward a little bit to divorce in colonial America. In 1629, in the colony of Massachusetts, there was a tribunal on divorce that was created, and you could get a divorce due to adultery, impotence, desertion, and bigamy. And there did seem to be quite a divide between the north and the southern, northern and southern colonies. They seem to disagree on a lot throughout history. The north seemed a little bit more in favor of divorce, whereas the south was saying, no way, Jose. Divorce laws became less restrictive after we became an independent nation from Great Britain. In the 1700s, there were actually divorce towns that popped up. So there were places in Indiana, Utah, South Dakota, North Dakota, where people went and you could get a divorce more speedily. And entire towns and businesses were built around this industry. So divorce is becoming something that actually happened and people talked about. Still not that much, but by 1887, it was happening enough that Congress ordered the first divorce statistic compilation. So clearly this was happening. The government wanted to get a handle on the numbers. In the 1920s, this idea of living together before marriage pretty much started. It was
1920s?
The 1920s, yeah. It was pretty scandalous beforehand. I mean, this is also a time when women essentially were going from their father's house to their husband's house. But this idea of having a trial marriage, of being married, of living together before marriage but not having children, really sort of began in the 1920s, and we're seeing is in full force today. Marriage counseling as just a thing that happened began in the 20s, the 30s. By the 50s...
What they used to call marriage counseling? Going to the bar.
Family court began in the 50s, and law practices focused only on divorce sprang up in the 50s as well. The 50s is such an interesting time in history because it's so polarized. It's touted as this time of extreme, like, family values. I mean, think of shows like Leave It to Beaver, like this idyllic America. But the 50s is also when we have literally courts so that the family can come apart being established. We have, on the one hand, poodle skirts and sock hops, and on the other hand, we have Playboy. So the 50s are a really interesting time in American history.
Was that when Playboy just came out?
The 50s, yeah.
Wow. He's old.
He's very old. Maybe I'll talk about the 50s in another podcast.
Yeah,
it's such an interesting decade. Okay, so in the 50s, 60s, divorce is starting to happen a little bit more frequently. But during this time, to be granted divorce in America, you still had to kind of villainize one of the parties. And this is because there was no such thing as no-fault divorce. No-fault divorce came on the scene in the 1970s, and it has been transformative. Before this, you had to prove one person was in the wrong. There were a lot of PIs employed in order to, catch one spouse in the act cheating on the other. You had to vilify one another in court. I mean, this is not good if you want to have a healthy co-parenting relationship post-divorce if you have children. But with no-fault divorce, we can just kind of say, all right, this didn't work out. It's nobody's fault. Let's try to move forward and not,
Except yours, Junior. Make the kid feel terrible.
Let's move forward in a way that we don't have to talk badly about one another. California was the first state to have no-fault divorce in 1969, and other states came after that. Fast forwarding to today, we're seeing kind of an interesting time for divorce because one of the most interesting populations that's embracing divorce are really old people. So we're having something called the gray divorce as a new phenomenon. You're in your 60s, we're living longer than ever before. If you have another 20, 30 years to kill and you're not with the paramour of your dreams, you're going to say, all right, my life is not over. I can still have another chapter. Especially with online dating and, people are healthier longer and longer.
Do you think that's a dating site? Oldpeopleonly.com?
Old people only? Probably. I think it's like porn. If you can think of it, it exists. So I think if you can think of it, there's a dating site for it. So these gray divorces now represent 25% of all divorces filed each year. And in the last 20 years, the divorce rate among people 50 and older has doubled. So, older divorces are also a little bit oftentimes more complicated because by the time you're 60, you probably have more assets. You have more stuff to divide up. You've built a whole life. Your lives are much more tangled in a financial sense than perhaps if you get divorced when you're 30. So older divorces are often very, very complicated. In the United States, this idea that 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce is not really true. The national divorce rate in the United States is 41%. I'll just give you some other nations to compare it to. Mexico has a very low divorce rate at 15%. Canada has a very high divorce rate at 48%. Somewhere in the middle, we've got South Africa at 31.2%, Japan at 36%, France is at 55%. That's pretty high. Divorce is actually really good for business. In the United States, there's about 1 million divorces a year. Mm-hmm. That's 2 million people starting over, and they all need stuff. They need lawyers, they need therapists, they need new furniture, they need movers, they need a new house to live in, they need stuff to go in the house. I think it breaks down to 1 divorce every 36 seconds. So this is a $1 billion industry. And more money passes through divorce courts than all other courts combined in the United States every year. So, according to some articles I read, marriage, think about all the money people spend on weddings. It's insane. It's out of hand. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. But whatever. You want to spend a lot of money on your wedding, go for it. Marriage is a $40 billion industry in the United States conservatively. Divorce, conservatively, is a $50 billion industry. So we are spending more as a nation on divorces than we are on marriages. But there is some good news. The new trend in divorce is to be nice to one another. People give Gwyneth Paltrow a lot of crap, but this idea of conscious uncoupling really is, she didn't really come up with it. She just put kind of 2 words to it, to this phenomenon that's already happening. In divorce courts now, especially with custody, it used to be that, the kids would just kind of automatically, you expected them to go to the mom. But now it seems like courts are starting from a place of saying 50-50 is what's best for everyone. So men are getting more and more involved in childcare in and outside of marriage. So we have also collaborative law, in which couples agree not to take their divorce to trial, but instead they try to reach a settlement independently. We have just people are trying to treat divorce as less of a traumatic experience and more of a family reorganization. So I think we can really look at no-fault divorce in 1969 in California as this huge turning point for divorce in America, and I think that's a really positive thing. So in the United States, clearly, it's great to be married if you're with someone wonderful, but I'm glad that we're living in a country where it's getting less traumatic to be a divorcee.
Yeah, I think that's healthier for everyone.
For everybody.
I mean, it'd be great if everything worked out for everyone, but it's definitely better if things don't work out to not have to traumatize kids and traumatize each other.
Yeah. It is a trauma.
It is.
It literally is a trauma.
I mean, think about all those family movies that we would miss out on about
Mrs. Doubtfire.
But yeah, exactly. There's no Mrs. Doubtfire if it wasn't
traumatic.
Traumatic, right? Yeah.
I read an article that the human brain processes emotional and physical pain the same way. So this emotional pain of divorce and heartbreak, it really does hurt. You're literally hurting. So if we have a legal system and a society in which we're trying to ease that pain, it is like treating a trauma. So we've come a long way from beheading people in England to get out of marriages to just saying they suck on the stand to now saying, it just didn't work out. So
nice.
Moving in the right direction.
And there has been 62 divorces since we started this podcast.
Aww.
So, fun stuff. Okay, but I think that's it.
I think that's
Good
about
job.
it, Mikey Mike.
All right. Hey, we can do this at the same time. Brienza's nope. Still no.
Oh, wait. We got to tell people our website and stuff.
Oh, right. We should probably do that. Okay, so you can find this at bkbpodcast.com.
That's bkbpodcast.com.
You can say hey and give us an idea about what to talk about at hi@bkbpodcast.com.
That's hi@bkbpodcast.com.
Okay, and you can send us money at advertising@bkbpodcast.com.
That's ADVERTISE.
Nope. Nope.
Google how to spell advertising. I know how.
Okay. Google that whole phrase. Google how to spell advertising. I know how.
On Alta Vista.
That reminds me of like that old lady who Googled things very politely. Like, can you please show me videos of cats, please? Thank you very much. Because she thought that someone at Google was like,
so cute.
helping her out.
That's like grandma.
It was a very old lady. This kid like saw his grandma doing that and he like took a picture.
So if you want to listen to our podcast, type into Google, can I please listen to Brienza's Know Best?
So one last thing. I have a book out right now. It's called Help, I'm in My 20s and I don't know anything about money. It's great for people of any age, despite the title talking about people in their 20s. It's $3. It's on iTunes. It's on Amazon Kindle. And if you feel like having a signed copy, and you know me, you can buy the physical version for $7 and then drive over to my house and sign it for you. Search on Amazon or iTunes Mike Brienza. It's a lot easier.
It's also on our website, bkbpodcast.com.
But I think that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll do this again for real this time.
Brienza's out.